Mid-February 1943. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel sat in his command post near the Tunisian border, writing a letter to his wife, Lucy. His forces had just smashed through American positions at Kasserine Pass. Outside, the Africa Corps was celebrating victory. Inside, Rommel was analyzing what he had learned about the Americans. The letter was blunt. Rommel wrote that the Americans were soft, lacked proper training, and their officers made amateur mistakes that would have gotten them court-martialed in any European army. Rommel had just watched American forces break and run at Kasserine Pass. Over 6,000 American casualties in 6 days. Entire battalions surrendered. Equipment abandoned on the battlefield. It was the kind of collapse Rommel had seen from the French in 1940. The Americans didn't just lose at Kasserine, they were humiliated. Soldiers who had grown up on stories of World War I heroism were suddenly questioning if they were cut out for this. Rommel didn't just see a tactical opening. He thought he was witnessing the American spirit breaking in real time. He wrote to Lucy that if Germany could launch another offensive within weeks, they could push the Americans into the sea before they learned how to fight properly. The assessment was shared with Berlin. Exploit American weakness immediately. Don't give them time to adapt. Rommel's assessment wasn't based on prejudice. It was based on observed performance. At Kasserine Pass, American forces had demonstrated multiple critical failures. Their commanders positioned units poorly. Radio discipline collapsed under pressure. Coordination between infantry and armor was non-existent. When German forces attacked, American units retreated without orders, creating cascading panic. The American Second Corps commander, Major General Lloyd Fredendall, had built his headquarters in a canyon 70 miles behind the front lines. He communicated by radio and telephone without seeing the battlefield. His orders were confused and contradictory. German intelligence officers compiled detailed reports. American equipment was adequate. American soldiers fought bravely when cornered. But American command structure was amateur. These were not soldiers who had faced the Wehrmacht before. They were learning warfare in real time against Germany's best. Rommel calculated it would take the Americans at least 6 months to fix their leadership problems. Probably 12 months to develop effective doctrine. If Germany struck again in March, the results would be similar to Kasserine. German armored doctrine had proven itself against every opponent since 1939. Concentrate superior force at a weak point, break through with armored spearheads, exploit the breakthrough with mobile formations, force the enemy to retreat or be encircled. This doctrine had shattered French armies in 6 weeks. It had destroyed Soviet armies in 1941. It had pushed British forces across North Africa twice. The formula worked because most armies fought defensively, trying to hold lines that German mobility could bypass. Kasserine Pass had proven the Americans fought the same way. They established defensive positions and waited to be attacked. When German armor concentrated against weak sectors, American forces retreated rather than counterattack. Rommel studied the terrain around El Ghoutar in central Tunisia. It was perfect for another demonstration. If German forces attacked there in late March, they would catch American units still recovering from Kasserine. The psychological advantage alone would be decisive. Berlin approved Rommel's assessment. One more offensive would break American morale completely. Then Germany could shift forces to face the British, while Americans shipped their defeated army home. German intelligence reported a command change in early March. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr. had assumed command of Second Corps on March 6, 1943, the same corps that had collapsed at Kasserine Pass. When Patton arrived at Second Corps headquarters, the atmosphere changed before he even spoke. He rolled in with a siren-blaring motorcade, wearing his famous ivory-handled revolvers. He didn't just issue orders, he issued an ultimatum. The days of the soft American were over. Patton forced men to wear ties and regulation helmets in the desert heat, not out of vanity, but to remind them they were professionals, not defeated refugees. Officers who arrived without proper uniform were fined on the spot. Soldiers who didn't salute were reprimanded publicly. One general couldn't fix systemic problems in 3 weeks. That was the German assessment. Patton might improve morale slightly. He might enforce better discipline, but he couldn't teach an entire corps new doctrine in less than a month. Rommel's health was failing. His stomach ailments and exhaustion were worsening, but his tactical mind was sharp. He reviewed the El Guitar attack plan one final time before turning operational command over to General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim. The plan assumed American defensive tactics. The plan assumed American hesitation under pressure. The plan assumed that 3 weeks wasn't enough time to transform an army. Every assumption was logical, based on German experience, against every other opponent. March 22, 1943. German forces prepared to attack American positions near El Guitar. The German order of battle included the 10th Panzer Division with Mark IV tanks and the experienced Italian Centauro Division. German commanders briefed their units on expected American responses. Americans would defend from fixed positions. When German armor concentrated, Americans would call for air support that might not arrive. If pressure increased, Americans would retreat like at Kasserine. The German tanks had superior firepower and armor protection. German 75mm guns could penetrate Sherman armor at 2,000 yards. Sherman guns needed to close to 500 yards for effective penetration. The technical advantage in firepower was decisive in open desert terrain. German artillery prepared fire plans to suppress American positions. The entire operation was designed to exploit what worked at Kasserine. March 23, 1943. Dawn broke over El Guitar. German forces advanced expecting another victory. They were about to discover that 3 weeks was enough time to change everything that mattered. The German attack began at 6 a.m. Lead elements of the 10th Panzer Division rolled toward American positions held by the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. Visibility was good. Terrain was favorable. Everything matched the operational plan. Then American artillery opened fire. Not ranging shots, not scattered fire. Coordinated time-on-target salvos that dropped multiple batteries on German positions simultaneously. Every gun in 2nd Corps could concentrate its fire on a single point at the exact same second. This level of artillery coordination was something German forces, still relying heavily on horse-drawn artillery, could not replicate. The accuracy was shocking. The volume was devastating. German tanks took direct hits. Radio operators heard urgent calls from infantry units requesting medical evacuation. The Americans weren't suppressed. They were firing back with precision that suggested professional forward observers and experienced artillery crews. The 10th Panzer Division kept advancing. This was expected resistance. Americans would break under sustained pressure. German commanders ordered units to push through the artillery and close with American positions. American tank destroyers opened fire from concealed positions. German Mark IVs started taking flank shots. The Americans weren't defending from obvious positions. They had positioned anti-tank weapons to create crossfire that made German armor vulnerable regardless of facing. By 9 a.m., German forces had penetrated 2,000 yards into American positions. This was normal for an offensive, but the Americans weren't retreating. They were conducting fighting withdrawals to prepared secondary positions. For the men of the 1st Infantry Division, El Guitar wasn't just a battle. It was an exorcism. They were the same soldiers who had been humiliated at Kasserine Pass. As the 10th Panzer rolled toward them, the big red one didn't look for an exit. They looked at their sights. They had traded their fear for cold, professional rage. German radio intercepts picked up American communications. The tone was